Lecture on transverse section of spinal cord and sensory ascending tracts. Next slide. There are two distinct parts is visualized when we cut spinal cord transversely. So inner side is in the form of H is the gray matter and outside is the white matter. Now layout of this is just reverse in brain tissue. In the brain tissue you will find outside is the gray matter and inside is the white matter. So the gray matter, it consists of neurons or cell bodies, while the white matter, they consist of myelin sheath of axons and tracts. So this is the gray matter. Gray matter can be divided into 10 layers and we numbered it Romanly from 1 to 10. 1 is the outermost, as second in the form of substantia gelatinosa. Then fourth is the nucleus proprius. Fifth and sixth is the dorsal nucleus or Clark's layer. Seventh is the intermediolateral nucleus. 8 and 9. 8 and 9 is the motor neuron of the anterior horn. 10th, there is no neurons but neuroglial cells to feed the neural canal and spinal cord gray matter. So, gray matter is divided into 10 layers and this is named after Rex. Rex laminae. Rex has divided the spinal gray matter according to the size and the shape of the neuron. He divided the gray matter into 10 layers, and out of these 10 layers, 6 are present in the dorsal horn and numbered as 1 to 6 in Roman. And these are the receiving neurons of the spinal cord. Lamina 10 is the area around the center canal rich in neuroglial cells. And in the ventral horn or anterior horn, lamina 8 and 9, which is present longitudinal columns of the motor neurons, and they are motor in functions. So in this diagram is quite, again there is a 1 to 10 layers, but these layers are specific in receiving the information. So layer 1 receives the information from A delta nociceptors. A delta nociceptors. These receptors, they send the information via A delta, while the peptidergic fibers 1 and 2, they convey their senses by C fibers and A delta fibers. Similarly, that is in the layer 2 and 1. While in layer 2, there is a C non-peptidergic fibers 2. Similarly, A beta hair follicles and tactile afferents from the 2 layer 1, 2 layer 1 subset and layer 5. Now this classification is very important. Neurologically, this classification is very important because it is this Rex laminae are useful in the different lamina has different functions. So the different functions are allotted to the different laminae, and this is very useful in neurological conditions. Neurons involved in sensations are lamina 1, they contain, that is present outside, outermost or marginal layer. Lamina 2 is having the appearance of gelatin. So due to the gelatinous appearance, it is called substantia gelatinosa. Lamina 4 and 5, they had larger cells, and this area is known as nucleus proprius. Lamina 6 gave the name also Clark's column and also known as nucleus dorsalis. Now, if we cut the transverse section, the blue color shows sensory tracts, ascending tracts. Means the neuron which are present here, they will receive the sensory input, then axons of these neurons, they ascend upward and the sensation reaches up to the cerebral cortex, may reach up to the cerebral cortex or up to reticular system or thalamus. But the other half, they show, that is represented in the pink color, shows motor tract or descending tracts. But mind it, both fibers are present in both halves. This is just a systemic diagram to show that these are the ascending tracts. So the main ascending tracts, you will find that first the white part is divided into 3 funiculars. Funiculus dorsalis, which has 2 tracts main, fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. These are constituted by first order neuron. Gracilis is present intermedially and they carry the fibers sensations from lower part of the body. As we go upside from the foot to the head region, then you will find that fibers entered laterally and they deposited here. It means the innermost is the big toe, or you can say foot region, and this side is the head region, neck region. In between two is the coma tract of Schurz is present. Another tract which are present in the antero-lateral area is dorsal spinocerebellar, anterior spinocerebellar or ventral spinocerebellar tract. As the name indicates, the ventral dorsal means they are present dorsally, spino means start from spine, cerebellar means they end into the cerebellum. Similarly here, ventral means situated ventrally, spino means start from spine, cerebellar means ends in the cerebellum. So if we want to mention the ascending tract, we must say where they are located, first point, second, from where it is originated, and where it is terminate. So this terminology is very clear in this section. There is a ventral spinocerebellar, lateral spinocerebellar. Fasciculus gracilis means it ends in a nucleus gracilis which is present in the dorsal part of the medulla, lower medulla. Fasciculus cuneatus means that it ends in the nucleus cuneatus which is present in the dorsal part of medulla, laterally. Spino-olivary tract start from spine ends in olivary nucleus. Similarly, spinotector tract, anterior spinothalamic tract, and lateral spinothalamic tract. Here it is written wrong. It is a lateral spinothalamic tract. It is not spinocerebellar. It is lateral spinothalamic tract. So, sensory functions are assigned to different tracts. Like dorsal column, evolution-wise, it is newly originated. It conveys the sensations of proprioceptions, vibrations, tactile discrimination. It ascends up to the medulla, and they cross after the medulla. After the relay, they cross to form the medial lemniscus and ascends up to the thalamus. After the second relay, it goes upward to the sensory cortex. So its function is to proprioception, vibration, tactile discrimination, fine touch, and etc. Spinothalamic. Once we say spinothalamic, as the name indicates, start from a spine, ends in the thalamus. It conveys pain and temperature. Medial conveys crude touch also. Tracts ascends one or two segments of the spinal cord on the same side. After that, they cross. And contralaterally, they form spinothalamic tract. Spinocerebellar convey proprioception unconscious level, ascends ipsilaterally. And ventral tract sent to contralateral as well as ipsilateral. Spino-reticular, they convey the deep and chronic pain. This is a very good diagram. In this diagram is visible that these are the sensory tracts, and in pink it is motor tracts. These are the dorsal horn divided into 6 layers, then 7th, 8th, and 9th, and 10th. Here it is written sacral region, lateral, thoracic, cervical. It means medialmost is the sacral, then lumbar, then thoracic, and then cervical. So it represents spatial orientation here, and this orientation maintained throughout its path up to the cerebral cortex. Now, if we say about the antero-lateral spinothalamic tract, then we will find the lateral most is the temperature, then pain, then the sensation of touch and the pressure. Out of these 4 modalities, temperature is the outermost or lateralmost, pressure is the innermost. Again here you will find spatial orientation, as you will find sacral is the innermost, sacral is outermost and cervical is innermost. So they maintain this orientation throughout its path. Okay. Next slide. So if the fibers they entered in the dorsal horn, then there are one dominant layer, that is substantia gelatinosa, and this is known as rex laminae. They are located at the apex of the horn. So apex of the horn, laminae 2, substantia gelatinosa. Termed is substantia gelatinosa because of its appearance. It is composed of large neurons which is present throughout the length of the spinal cord. They carries the fibers of pain, temperature and crude touch. Mind it, it is a crude touch. Nucleus proprius is the layer 4th and extend throughout the length. It is responsible for sense of position and movement. It is proprioception one. So here it is the red color is the layer 2, layer 4, that is nucleus proprius. So now we have learned about the transverse section of spinal cord. Now the next part is how the tracts are formed and they ascend, and what are the types of the tracts. Now central process of the dorsal root ganglion after entering, no, not after entering, just before entering into the spinal cord, it divides into two branches, that is medial and lateral. So there are two branches. So with the sensation reaches to the spinal cord by the medial division or lateral division. Medial division or lateral division. These are nothing but the axons of dorsal root ganglion. Now the medial division is myelinated and thicker fibers. They are responsible for fine touch, pressure, vibration. So it is, you can see new spinothalamic fibers. Now lateral division consists of thin myelinated group, or it may be unmyelinated. So A delta and C fibers you can presume. Group 3 fibers for the fast pain and temperature, while the group 4 for slow chronic pain. So when we say medial division, it is responsible for fine touch, pressure and vibrations. They are thicker in nature. And lateral division, they are thin myelinated or unmyelinated. They travel through the substantia gelatinosa of Rolando. Layer. Next slide. This is the medial division and this is the lateral division. As soon as the central process of root ganglion neuron reaches to the spinal cord, it divides into two, medial branch and lateral branch. Lateral branch is responsible for chronic pain, less discrimination. A delta and C nociceptor fibers, thermoreceptors, mechanoreceptor, visceral afferent. While these two type of the fibers, just like pressure, fine touch, is responsible for these two by the fiber 1 and 2. So the dorsal branch, or you can say medial branch, is responsible for fine touch. Now how the sensory ascending tracts are formed. First thing I told you, you must know the location of the tract. Then you must know from where it is originated. Third point, you must know where it is destined. Fourth point, what are the functions of this tract. Now the origin of the sensory tract. These are the receptors. Now receptor, these are the axons. These are the dendrites. Dorsal root ganglion, and these are the axon. So they constitute, this part constitute dorsal root of a spinal nerve. Dorsal root and this is the ventral root. Both combined together, then they form common spinal nerve. Now the dorsal root is sensory in nature, ventral root is motor in nature. These are the central processes of dorsal root ganglion responsible to form the dorsal root. Before entering into the ventral dorsal horn, grey matter, it divides into two, lateral and medial division. Now they will ascend upward either after crossing immediately or they ascend up to the level of 1 or 2 segment or may go up high up to the medulla. So these constitute ascending tract because after relaying here, the axons they ascend to a particular locations and they form the same type of the fibers, they group together and they form the tract. So the sensory tracts are very specific in carrying the specific sensation. Labeled line of principle follows here. Labeled line of principle. Secondly, what may happen after entering into the spinal cord and they connect to the interneuron and anterior motor neurons, they get stimulated and the effect is responsible for effector organ. Now this form a reflex arc and this is the basic of reflexes. Anyhow, the ascending tracts main modalities pain, temperature and crude touch mediated by lateral and anterior spinothalamic tract. This is lateral spinothalamic tract and this is anterior spinothalamic tract and both together known as antero-lateral spinothalamic tract. Second sensation is fine touch and the conscious proprioceptive sensation. They are mediated by tract of Burdeck or tract of Gall or fasciculus cuneatus, fasciculus gracilis. This is new names fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. They reaches up to the nucleus of gracilis, nucleus cuneatus of the medulla. Third type is the unconscious. Minded word is unconscious proprioception and muscular coordination. It means the sensation will not reach up to the cerebral cortex. They will reach up to the cerebellum. So cerebellum, once it reaches to the cerebellum, it is of two types, anterior spinocerebellar tract or posterior spinocerebellar tract according to the location. So it is a posterior spinocerebellar and this is anterior spinocerebellar tract. Posterior direct one and this is direct as well as indirect. By this diagram it is very clear that the first thing is the temperature, pain, temperature, touch and pressure. And they will maintain the sacral region, the lumbar, thoracic and cervical. In this lateral tracts, it is just same type, that is cervical, thoracic, lumbar and sacral. But here it is different, cervical, thoracic, lateral, lumbar and sacral. So that it constitutes two alternative pathway. It means after the medulla, it constitutes two alternative pathway. Either it is a dorsal column or antero-lateral spinal hemisphere system. It is visualized that lateral column and the anterior column, they combine together and they form antero-lateral lemniscus, while the dorsal column remain left over and is known as medial lemniscus system. So, what are the similarities between the two? Both convey the sensory information. Both have their second synapse with the VPL, ventro-posterolateral nucleus, in the thalamus. And third synapse is in the primary somatic sensory cortex, in the cerebral cortex. Both systems become contralateral following their synapse. And what are the dissimilarities between the two tracts? Means dorsal column tract and antero-lateral tracts. It is composed of large myelinated fibers, so the speed or velocity is more. Here it is constituted by smaller myelinated fibers, so the velocity is less. High degree of spatial orientation with respect to the origin. Less spatial orientation. Transmission rapid, as it is thicker fibers. This is less rapid. Adaptation rapid, but adaptation slow. So as I thicker fibers, A delta fibers, here the C fibers, A delta fibers. Adaptation is very fast, gradation of sensation is more accurate, and they mainly reaches to the somatosensory area of number 1. Gradation is not very accurate, slow adaptation, and slow pain relate to the thalamus, while the fast pain in the somatosensory area 1. So, lateral spinothalamic tract, it carries the sensation of pain and temperature. They relay or synapse after synapsing in the gray matter of lamina 2 and 3. Second order neuron cross immediately. So this is the rule. In the similarities, you will find that second order neuron always crossed. Anterior-spinothalamic tract carries the sensation of crude touch, pressure, tickle and itch. They relay in the lamina 3rd and 4th. They ascends for 1 or 2 segments and then crosses opposite side. In this area you will find, in this picture, primary somasthetic area 3, 1, 2. This is associated area. Secondary somasthetic area is here, and this is associated area. So if we ask you anterior-spinothalamic tract, you have to say the first function, then formed by the second order neuron, originate from where, cross at what level, and whether they ascend upward symmetry, same side, then crosses or immediately crosses, termination where it terminates. Once the destination is cerebellum, it controlled unconsciously, subconsciously, you can say. So there are two types of the fibers entered in the spinal cord. One is a smaller unmyelinated A delta or C fibers. Another is larger myelinated A beta for heat, cold and pressure. So if there is pain sensation as conveyed by C or A delta, it can be subsides to some extent by simultaneous simultaneous stimulation to larger myelinated A beta skin nerves. So the stimulation collaterals form the larger nerve fibers. They inhibit the smaller nerves, and this constitute open or close the gate. So gate theory. It may block the pain sensation or it may not block the pain sensation. It acts as a gate. So different fibers, types of the fibers can be grouped in different 1 to 4. Origin, from where they originate, what are their functions. So after the classification you learn, sensory group you learn, origin you must know, and their function. So if I ask you, this is one very important question, if I asked you the types of tactile receptor, because there is a fine touch also, there is a crude touch also. So the type of the tactile receptors, you can say there are 6 types: free nerve ending, Meissner's corpuscles, Merkel disc, ergodomoreceptors, hair and organs, Rufinus and organs, Pacinian's corpuscles. And each receptor has its own functions. If we say spinocerebellar tract, there are 2 types, anterior and posterior. Posterior concerned with the fine movements, while the anterior concerned with the cross movement of the limb. Posterior receives information from the trunk and lower limbs, while the anterior receives from upper and lower limbs both. But they control the coordination and movement of the muscles, controlling postures of the body. Similarly, you will find spino-olivary responsible for visual reflexes, spinotactile for proprioceptive reflexes. So whatever the sensation means either the pain, touch, fine touch, crude touch or pressure, they have to terminate in ventral posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. And from here, third order neuron arises, which ends into the somatic area. Area number 312, that is called primary somatic area. And the secondary is just below the primary one and above the lingual sulcus, you will find secondary somatic area. And area 5 and 7 is the secondary associated somatic area. So thalamus, most of the sensation passes through the thalamus except the sensation of smell. So the VPLN, the impulses to somatosensory cortex number 1, while the fibers ends in VPMN, then fibers they reaches to insular cortex, which is responsible for emotional and social awareness of empathy. Thanking you. Subscribe for next lecture.